Hello, everyone. We don't have Kiran here quite yet, but I thought I'd come on and say hello and get organized. So I decided to do this webinar as just a live stream on YouTube and our Facebook so that we don't have to mess around with registering. Oh, good. It looks like some people are on here. So we'll see how it goes. It's pretty easy to ask questions and stuff. Hold on a second. In the chat, if you're in Facebook, sometimes you have to give StreamYard permission to like show your name, which is better for us because then we know who's asking what. And let's see, what else was I going to say? I think when I put a comment, it goes to YouTube and I think my Facebook page, but it can't go to groups because of like permission. So if you're on a Facebook group watching, just I'll verbalize my comments, but I won't be able to write them down. Oh, here he is. Hi there. Oh, whoops. Do you need a minute?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I just put you on live like immediately.
Immediately, I love it. I just
Welcome.
I just made it back home, got cleaned up, and was able to run up here. So it's
Nice.
good.
Nice.
Yeah. How are you?
Good. I'm feeling the end of the day vibes.
Yes. Well, and it's only 3:00 over there, right?
I know. It already feels like the end of the day.
It's 5 over here.
Yeah, we're working you. Hi, Joe from Vancouver Island. So it's just explaining. People can write a question or a comment whenever you like. Just give StreamYard permission to show your name if you're on Facebook, and if you're in a Facebook group watching, my comments don't come through, but they come through everywhere else. We will have a recording on YouTube. I think it'll be right away on YouTube and then right away on the Facebook groups you're in. I'll just give a quick agenda before we get started. Did you see it, Kiran, or is this working? Okay, cool. Perfect timing then. So I think the first 2 points we're going to cover were sort of our impetus for doing this, which is talking about how some simple changes can really improve your health now. And also how taking care of your microbiome now can really benefit your long-term health and prevent chronic disease. So kind of framing it up like that. Yeah. And then I wanted to get into some of your new products we're carrying and kind of protocol. So we did a mold protocol, you and I will share that. I'll share that link and we'll chat about that again. Then I wanted to do kind of basic microbiome care, then IBSD, IBSC, kind of like adjustments. Skin and stress handling. Because a couple new products of yours we're carrying are the Serene Skin and the Zen Biome Cope. We also have the mini Restore Flora I wanted to chat about because it's actually never a product I've used. I've never used Restore Flora that much, but I'm kind of learning it's sort of like a good starter product. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. And also with antibiotics, and if you have a lot of upper respiratory stuff, if that's a regular issue for you, that's another good use for it as well.
Okay, awesome. Hold on one second. It's like not letting me post anything in the comments. It's odd. Oh, my keyboard's turned off. That'll do it. Okay. Well, first of all, welcome. He's a busy guy, but he always makes time to do a webinar for us. And I was promoting you earlier. I'm like, we've probably had thousands and thousands of views of our interviews together. So you're super popular. Yeah, we've got a good amount of people on live. A lot of people will watch later. So if you haven't met him, Kiran Krishnan is a microbiologist, co-founder of Microbiome Labs. I met him back in the day when he was going to a million conferences, giving away iPads to people who would sit and listen to him. And I'm so glad I met him. You know, he's always been the same person. He's just a delightful person, just a great lecturer. So again, we're lucky to have him. And we're lucky to have this ongoing relationship. I've been selling Microbiome Labs products, I don't know, maybe 6 years, some 7 years. And they've really grown with new products. You guys are kind of focusing on protocols now. So that's a little background. Where should we start, Kiran? We could start with maybe
some microbiome basics, maybe.
Yeah, let's do that.
We talked about I think one of the questions you asked early on was, how small changes you make now can be really beneficial, not only now but also for your long-term health, right? And so that's a really important thing to keep in mind when people are thinking about their overall health and the impact of the microbiome. It's that the microbiome's either negative or positive impact on your health, and it can be both, right? So a dysfunctional microbiome actually becomes one of the most toxigenic things to your system, whereas a healthy microbiome is the most supportive, protective thing to your system. So there's a spectrum in which your microbiome exists within you. And if you've had health issues in the past, whether it's simple things like indigestion, food intolerances, allergies, asthma, skin issues, not really serious stuff like cancers and so on, even those simplified things, they indicate that your microbiome is starting to lean towards not being beneficial and in fact being toxigenic and problematic. It's pretty clear through a number of studies now, including some meta-analysis study, which are studies that look at other studies and review the consensus around the science, that a dysfunctional microbiome is probably the number one cause of mortality and morbidity worldwide.
Wow.
And that's a 2015. It is, right? A 2015 publication in the Frontiers of Immunology concluded that after reviewing dozens upon dozens of studies on the topic. They said that, in fact, they narrowed it down more to leaky gut that comes about from a dysfunctional microbiome, and then the subsequent chronic low-grade inflammation that happens from leaky gut, which is probably the most profound source of chronic low-grade inflammation. That is the number one cause of mortality and morbidity worldwide. Why would that be, right? So then when you start looking at the biggest killers certainly in the developed world, things like diabetes, obesity, heart disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, various cancers, right? All of these conditions that are the top 7, 8, 9 killers out there, all of them have a connection to leaky gut, where leaky gut is either the onset of the condition or it is a factor that doesn't allow for that condition to improve. So, but when you take things like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all of those are initiated by leaky gut, right? There's no doubt about that. Then you go on to complex things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Those are also initiated by leaky gut and the toxins that leak through, specifically LPS or endotoxin. And then when you look at all kinds of immune dysfunction, so autoimmune conditions, cancers, all of those types of inflammatory conditions, those are all driven, not necessarily initiated by, but driven by leaky gut, right? Those require some degree of genetic predisposition and a couple other environmental factors, but they're certainly made worse by leaky gut, and becomes really hard to make progress on those conditions without alleviating leaky gut. And of course, leaky gut comes from dysbiosis. Dysbiosis, of course, being an imbalance of microbes in your GI tract. But the big question's always been is what is the imbalance, right? What's off, and how do you know what's off in different people? The good news is, as you dig into the research and you dig into the pathways in which a dysfunctional microbiome can drive disease states in individuals, you come to realize that there's a couple of basic features of the microbiome that tend to be off in people with dysbiosis. And those two very basic things are alpha diversity, which is how many viable species do you have in your microbiome, and then and some degree of uniformity to those species as well.
Do you call it alpha diversity?
Alpha diversity, yeah, because there's also a different type of diversity called beta diversity. Beta diversity is how does your microbiome look in general to others in your geographic region, right? So what is your distribution of species like compared to the average person in your geographic region? Is your species distribution way off and looks like you spent 8 months in the Congo and then just came back, and so your species diversity is way off, or distribution is way off than people typically in North America. So that is your beta diversity. Beta diversity, we rarely see people with really off or bad beta diversity. It's mostly the alpha diversity component of it, which is how many viable species do you have within your microbiome.
Did you say, sorry, I keep interrupting you. Is that, you said that's variety and quantity together?
Variety and distribution, yeah. So uniformity, right? And the reason for that is you could have, let's say you have amazing number of species in your gut. You have 250 different species in your gut. That would be really good for a Westerner in North America. But let's say, 85 of those or 100 of those are at such low levels. You might have a few cells of that species, but they're at such low levels that they're not really functional. Then it still doesn't help the diversity of the gut microbiome. So you need to have a certain degree of uniformity so that if you have 200 species, you have most of them being viable, contributing to the ecosystem, contributing to the host, which is us, and so on, right? So that becomes a very important factor. So when you measure diversity in the gut microbiome, you use a couple of different indexes. You have something called the Shannon index or the Simpson index. Those indexes take into account uniformity as well. So the more number of species, the more uniform it is, the better off. It doesn't have to be every species exactly the same. There's, of course, going to be variances, but we want most organisms, most species to have some degree of viable cells, right? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is keystone species. These are those really important protective strains. There's a handful of those in your microbiome. There are things like Akkermansia, Faecalibacteria prosnitzi, Bifidolongum, Bifidobacterium. So these are considered really, really important organisms, and they're called keystone, as in the keystone in an arc, in an architectural type of design called an arc, where the middle stone, the keystone, kind of holds up the entire structure. And these are important because they hold up and protect the structure of the microbiome. They also protect and rebuild the lining of the gut. They also communicate with the immune system quite a bit. So they maintain that relationship between the gut microbiome and the immune system. So they play all of these really important roles within the system. And if you start to lose keystone species and you have really low levels of them, that is associated pretty clearly with disease state. So for example, Faecalibacteria prosnitzi is inversely correlated with everything under the inflammatory bowel spectrum, right? So Crohn's, colitis, microcolitis, even colorectal cancers. Akkermansia muciniphila is inversely correlated. What that means is inversely means when one is high, the other one's low, and vice versa, right? So Akkermansia muciniphila is inversely correlated with everything under cardiometabolic syndrome, which is heart disease, diabetes, obesity, polycystic ovarian syndrome, dementia, all of these different 60-something conditions that fall under that umbrella. If you have high levels of Akkermansia, you tend to be protected against those conditions. So just a couple of keystone species that alone play a very significant role in protecting the host from the pathologies that lead to these conditions. So at the end of the day, the message here is there's two fundamental things people should constantly be focusing on with their microbiome: alpha diversity and increasing growth of keystone species. If you do just those two things, right, it'll go a long way, not only to improving your outcomes now, but also playing really significant protective roles in the future as well. Now, there's a reason why, the vast majority of Americans have multiple chronic diseases, right? So most Americans have 2 or more chronic illnesses. The reason for that is because most of these chronic illnesses have the same cause, the same driver. So when the driver is present, which is leaky gut, dysbiosis, low diversity, low keystone species, when these drivers are present, then one condition after the other keeps showing up, right? It's not very hard. You start with obesity, then you go to diabetes, then you get heart disease, and then it goes on to things like severe food intolerances, and then cancers show up, and irritable bowel, and all kinds of things. It just keeps spiraling out of control. And again, a lot of it is because they're driven by the same problem. So we start off by focusing on diversity and the keystone species. The way we did that from a product perspective is we showed that the spores, megaspore in particular, does increase not only diversity, alpha diversity within the microbiome, but also does increase keystone species. And that's the other reason why we also launched the prebiotic, the Mega Pre, because the Mega Pre goes a long way with helping the growth of these keystone species and maintaining alpha diversity. So for most people, the base recommendation is that they're on Megaspore, and then they're utilizing the Mega Pre, and certainly trying to add more, things like fiber and all that into their diet, because a lot of these keystone species really love fiber and resistant starches and so on. So that becomes kind of your Microbiome 101. Those are the two things you should always be focusing on. You can never work too much on diversity. You can never work too much on your keystone species, because not only, is anything that you do that improves the diversity in keystone species beneficial for you, but we constantly have things working against our diversity and our keystone species, in particular, things like, Roundup in the environment, antibiotics in our food, chlorine in our drinking water, all of the chemicals that we're constantly exposed to, of course, stress, poor diet choices, low fiber intake, all of these things work against those two factors. So you should always be mindful and working towards higher diversity and higher keystone species.
Awesome. He's like just a little bunny. You just turn him on. He just goes.
I had to get thinking in my head. I was like, I got to pause at some point because there's something Bridget has to say. So
I can just take a nap. But I know I take really good notes, and I'm sure people are hearing. So I want to kind of like just sum up some things you said, because really we've already kind of got the core of the protocol here, right? Because we're gonna customize later. But what happens in the modern world? We eat convenience foods. We're chronically stressed, right? We're staying up too late. So minimizing those things. Getting more fiber. Curtis in the chat was asking about it. Yeah, most of us don't get enough. Since the beginning, I've interviewed you, and you've said to go to the Asian market, get different vegetables. Dr. Karazian talks about that a lot too. I love the Mega Pre. I made a point to bring it up. I mean, I think I've told you before, sometimes I only take this and not my Megaspore, because I think it's so fantastic. And we don't sell enough of it. So I'm constantly saying, please take it. So he's saying as the base, and again, we can build out Mega Pre, Megaspore Biotic, more fibers, minimizing your exposure to pesticides, herbicides, convenience foods, managing your stress. Any other kind of basics you want to throw in there, Kiran?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the food choices, try to choose organic if you can, as much as you can, because again, you're reducing then your exposure to the most egregious pesticides out there, right? So that helps. Filter your water at home. The chlorine and the fluoride and all that stuff that's in your water is not good for your gut. We do that. We've got a couple of different filter systems in the home, RO and whatnot. And then also a few simple things are things like getting outside enough. It's pretty clear from the research that engaging in the outside environment has a positive impact on your gut diversity. So getting into natural environments, and like Bridget's lucky, she lives in an area where there's a lot of wonderful natural areas to go out although maybe not now, I'm sure.
Not right now.
150
You could die.
right now. But a lot of the year you can go out and be in a natural environment, and be prescriptive about it, right? So write yourself a prescription to go out 3 times a week, 30 minutes at a time at least, and get your hands and feet in dirt if you can, and touch things, natural things. If you go on a hike, grab rocks and pick up sticks and do what kids normally would do, right? Things that we go, put that down, don't grab that, don't bring this. They are naturally sampling their environment all the time, and that's a good thing in a natural environment, right? So that simple thing, you can get a dog if your household can handle it. Having dogs in the household actually diversifies your microbiome and reduces the incidence rate of allergies, asthma, and viral infections as well. And then let's think, what else you can. And I think, and I want to emphasize this, Bridget, you mentioned this, but managing stress is going to be key. We could talk about, so there's 2 sides of stress, right? There's how we deal with it, which can be impacted by mindfulness work and all that, breath work, meditation, coping mechanisms, and so on. That's one side. That's the brain gut side. But then there's a gut brain side. There's a biology, microbiology component that actually makes you more susceptible to stress, makes you more susceptible to not coming down from the stress, and actually makes you more susceptible for long-term chronic anxiety, depression, and so on. So you do have to address both, so we'll address the second half as we go on here, but keep in mind the mindfulness stuff is important too, right? Find a way to escape for you, a way that allows you to detach for a moment, whether it's 30 minutes, 40 minutes at a time. It doesn't have to be a very complicated thing. You don't have to become a yogi and have out-of-body experiences for an hour, right? You can do a 10-minute meditation on an app. You can find a quiet room and just sit and breathe. Very simple things like that will go a long way. So those cost virtually nothing.
Awesome. Yeah, another thing I wanted to chat about, because I think people are maybe listening and hearing, well, I don't eat fast food, and most of my audience is already trying, so to speak, and some of them still are having leaky gut. I think too, Karan, sometimes where it came from, we hear different things, right? You're saying that microbiome being off comes first. Some people are, it's only from gluten. So I wonder if you could just get in a little bit more to what do you, if anything, commonly see with quote unquote healthy people that are still a common weak link that they have?
Yeah. Well, I think that diversity within the microbiome and the ability to utilize good nutritional choices is a big issue for people, right? So remember the old idea of you are what you eat. It's really you are what you absorb. And so your ability to assimilate and utilize nutrients is going to be critical. And that's the second half of eating right? So if you're already making good food choices and you're choosing the organic stuff, you're choosing healthy foods, and you're eating a good, diverse, healthy diet, your microbiome still may not be adequate enough to utilize that nutrition effectively. You may have had a history of lots of antibiotics. You may have had a history of really poor stress and lifestyle, or you were born C-section, and so you're already born with a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to the microbiome. So there's a number of factors that can go in to not having the ability to utilize nutrition well. So that's why, to me, when it comes to the microbiome, because we have so many things that work against our microbiome that we are inadvertently exposed to, right? Whether you like it or not, you are being exposed to glyphosate. Whether you like it or not, you are being exposed to hordes of different pesticides and antibiotics and all that, right? It's present everywhere. All these things are ubiquitous in our environment nowadays. So I think everybody needs to take a concentrated step and effort towards really fixing and managing the gut, utilizing tools like probiotics, prebiotics, mucosal builders, and so on, right? Then you'll find that the things that you eat and the good choices that you make actually have a much more profound impact on you than they would have previously. So even though you've been making healthy choices the last 6-7 years, it doesn't necessarily mean that the one thing or the two things that were really dysfunctional in your gut got repaired through that. You may still need to intervene and take a more aggressive step towards repairing that.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, it's not so simple anymore. We do test people for glyphosate if you order that particular test and other toxins, and it's surprising, how prevalent it is. And I do think some people just genetically don't clear it as well. There are some tips we could talk about later, but yeah, we're all set up differently. We're all still under a certain amount of stress, still some pesticide. I mean, again, our clients are eating organic, have filters, all this stuff, and you'd be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. Some people would be surprised what comes up. So yeah, I do think you have to go the extra mile, and I'm the same way. I have a filter. Somebody asked which filter we like, so I put my filter in the chat. I mean, I do all those things, and still my gut goes up and down with travel and stress. So yeah, so I really like having these products on hand to, I kind of like you suggested, I do my basics. And then if I'm like, oh, I'm feeling, a little loose stool, I'm going to take my Mega IgG. I sort of know the tools and I have them around. So yeah, I do think, unfortunately, in this day and age, you do have to go the extra mile.
Yeah, we just the world we live in is unfortunately way too toxic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the most things around us have a negative impact on the gut microbiome, because most things around us have some sort of antimicrobial function, and we are a microbial being, right? So everything around us works against us. And so it's just unfortunate. It's kind of like if you talk to people who are really focusing on food, like you talk to Mark Hyman, for example, right? It becomes pretty clear in his work that he's done that even if you're choosing to eat a super healthy, clean diet, the broccoli of today doesn't have the same nutritional content as the broccoli from 40, 50 years ago, right? Because the soil is so depleted. And there are lots of companies that are really doing regenerative agriculture, biodynamic farming to try to regenerate the diversity in the soil and bring back life into the soil. But 99.9% of farms and places where we grow food have dead soil. And when you have dead soil, you have nutritionally depleted plants. And so and they try to supplement the soil quite a bit, with things like phosphorus and so on, that plants basically can't use well because they don't have any microbes on their roots. So it's a fascinating thing to think that we are in this place now where you really cannot be healthy, quote unquote, in my view, without some form of supplementation. Right, because our world is too toxic. Our food supply is just not adequate enough right now.
Yeah, I think one thing I do notice that you've changed in covering since I met you is this whole other element. And of course, I really agree. And my own practice grew that way because of my own toxic exposure. When I first started to get interviewed more about detox, I was surprised at the question I got, which was often like, do we really need to detox? Like, I was like, what? And so I had to learn to, structure that answer just like you did. Like, do you think, your diet is sufficient and the food quality is sufficient and that you're not exposed to toxins? Like, there's just no way. And
then exactly. And when you combine the level of exposure that we all have to toxins and all, even if you're choosing a healthy lifestyle, right? This is inadvertent exposure. And then you add on top of that the dysfunctions in the microbiome and other organ systems that are required for detoxing, right? Your cytochrome P450 system, your liver, your gallbladder, all of these things that play a role in detoxing, and how those organs are taxed, how the liver is really taking the brunt. I did recently a live with Dr. Asia Muhammad, we really dug into how the liver is kind of this unsung hero, and how it's really shocking to see now how prevalent fatty liver is, and how it's affecting younger and younger people, and how much cirrhosis of the liver is now driven by fatty liver as a primary source, then hepatitis, and then alcohol, right? So it used to be, back in the day, it used to be alcohol and then hepatitis, B or C, and then fatty liver, and then non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was like a very rare thing. Now it's super common, and the liver plays one of the biggest roles in detoxing the body. And so when the detox system, the filter of the system, is dysfunctional and taxed, you can't get rid of these toxins well enough. So you do have to go through these focused approaches of supplementation, detox, cleaning up lifestyle as much as you can. You have to do all of those things.
Yeah, I need to write a book about the liver someday, because luckily people are interested. They're like, what about my liver? They know it's important. And I just want to give a quick sidebar, because I had a client ask this the other day. Like, first of all, and then I want to bring up something you said earlier, the liver needs a bunch of nutrition. People kind of looking for all this fancy stuff. It needs a bunch of protein. It needs B vitamins. I'm surprised at how many of my clients are taking a lot of supplements and no multivitamin, no basic stuff. So please think about that, and think about what Kiran said earlier, that an unhealthy gut is very toxic to the body. So it's adding to that load. So one way to protect your liver, and Lisa asked me in the chat about the IgG, is to just keep that inflammation down, keep that diversity up. So if if your stomach isn't feeling well because you haven't been eating well, that's inflammation hanging around, spreading around, that your liver has to process. The gut is potentially opening up too when you have that toxin exposure. So it's all connected. And yeah, I just appreciate you preaching it. I'm just always like, every day you got to think about detox. That's how often.
You do. Yeah, I mean, your body's doing it every minute of every day, right? And you're going to need to assist your body in that function, because again, our bodies and what we expose our bodies to and all that are wholly inadequate for optimal function, right? We have to hack things, we have to figure things out and support things. So that's just the way of the world these days. Gone are the days where you could go, oh, I could have a perfect lifestyle, like you eat the right things, you do the right things, and you'll be perfectly healthy. Unfortunately, that I don't think that exists, unless of course you're like a hermit and you're living on the side of the mountain and you're foraging for your own food and you've got no modern disruptions and all that. Because what's crazy about it, and as I say that, it reminds me of researchers that we work closely with, like Jens Walter, that works with the Papua New Guinea tribes, right, who are hunter-gatherer tribes still, and then the Hadza tribe in Tanzania. So there are still these tribes that live an ancestral life, and even they are starting to see disruptions in their gut microbiome, right? Our stuff is seeping into these remote areas, and they're getting they're getting, their water source is getting contaminated, having higher heavy metals. The air that they breathe is getting higher particulate matter, and then they start getting exposed to Western things, like, all of a sudden now there's a McDonald's within a half-day walk from
there's
where
Wi-Fi, right?
exactly. So so there's very few places on earth where you can exist and not supplement, not detox, not support your system in some way and still be healthy. So I think everybody has to play an active role in doing those things.
Yeah. And I know we're sort of preaching to the choir with this audience, but I did want to bring it up because I know some people listening might be like, well, I'm doing those things he said, and I still don't feel well. So that is why we're giving you these extra supplemental solutions. I want to first do kind of the different IBS solutions, modifications, because it kind of came up. My two really basic favorites are using Omega IgG 2000 for more of a loose stool picture. It's usually there's some dysbiosis and infections. You don't have to know that necessarily, though. It's so strong, I take it in the morning because it can be a little constipating even. So that's
and when you take it, you do have to increase your water intake, to avoid some of that constipation. So, you have to drink 15-20% more water, but it's very powerful, and it's super effective, right? So if you have irritable bowel and you lean more towards that loose stool, typically what we do to support the gut is we talk about megaspore as being foundational, mega pre. If you don't have SIBO and you're pretty comfortable taking fibers and prebiotics, and the mega pre and mega spore become really important. And then the mega IgG, which Bridget mentioned, you can do as much as 4 caps in the morning, 4 caps before bed, and so beginning and end of your day. And then another one that actually has an impact on IBS, which is actually a gut-brain product, but that's Zenflora. So if your IBS is actually really bad, and you really want to go after the neurological components associated with IBS and support the nerves, because IBS, of course, is irritable bowel, and there's lots of spasmodic activity in the bowel. That neurological dysfunction component of it can actually be helped by the ZenBiome Cope. Because that strain, the sister strain to that, the Bifidolongum 35624, has something like 8 or 9 IBS studies on it, and both of the strains function very similarly. We'll be launching that strain for IBS down the road, but this Bifidolongum 1714 works in a very similar manner. So we do use it with people for IBS to support the neurological component of it.
Interesting. I did not know that, but I do like this product. I just noticed a couple days ago, Karan, like these new ones are spendy, but their dosing is smaller generally.
Yeah, they are.
So one capsule it'll last you 60 days. And same with the Serene skin. At first I was like, people are going to be a little intimidated because these are not cheap, but it lasts you 2 months. I just ordered today, because you can see this is empty, the Serene skin. I love it. In this weather, I get I don't know if it's eczema or what it is, but the heat is just like pushing out of my skin.
Totally, yeah.
And I'm like, I need to get back on this. So we're kind of bouncing around. But so the Mega IgG, which I don't have handy, for good one. You said also potentially this one plus. Oh, okay, awesome. Plus this ZenBiome Cope could help for some loose stool too, or IBS, plus stress handling, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because and also what's interesting about IBS, when you look at the data, about 52% of IBS patients also have diagnosed anxiety. So it goes hand in hand. Compare that to non-IBS age-matched people. It's about 19%. So you're almost 2.5 times more likely to have anxiety if you have IBS. And that's because there's that neurological dysfunction. That neurological dysfunction is part of the gut-brain axis, where the enteric nervous system is getting dysfunctional and spasmodic. That also creates neurotransmitters to the brain that drive more anxious feeling. So what's interesting about the ZenBiome is that's exactly the mechanism that it works on, right? And that's how it helps with mood, but also it can have a very positive impact on IBS as well. So yeah, you could throw that in with your IBS, whether it's C or D. It should support the neurological side of the condition.
Awesome. I love that combo. So that's like something you could consider, this alone or this with the Mega IgG. I would do definitely the Mega IgG if you're having a lot of loose stool. Yeah. So for me, for more of a constipated type person, or like a lot of food sensitivities and stomach upset, I guess it's not stomach upset, it's like bowel irritation, I like the Mega Mucosa.
Yes.
Can you chat about that?
Yeah, so there's 2 products that we would recommend in that realm. So if you have IBS and you tend to be constipated, your bowels aren't moving, you've got a bit of a stasis happening in the bowel, meaning the signals from the brain to move the bowels aren't making their way through. You almost certainly have leaky gut. So the megaspore plays a role. The mega pre plays an important role. And then in addition to what Bridget mentioned, the mega mucosa, what we love about the mega mucosa is the ability of the mega mucosa to increase the growth of akkermansia, and also to calm down some of that inflammatory response that's going on in the lining of the gut. Because when you're constipated and stool and food products are sitting there for longer in your bowel, they tend to putrefy and they tend to get overly fermented, and you start to get byproducts from that drive inflammatory responses in the lining of the gut. And that inflammatory response just makes the constipation even worse. So it becomes a continuous downward spiral to having your bowels not really moving. So the megamucosa plays a very important role in helping with that inflammatory response in the gut. So it's really supporting kind of a healthy immunological response, and then also helping rebuild that mucosal layer. There's another product that actually fits in there quite well that we tend to recommend to people who have this type of scenario, and that's the fish oil, the gut-specific fish oil.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you have that in front of you.
I thought you were going to say the MegaGuard, so I put that in the notes.
Oh, MegaGuard, yes.
But we can talk about both. We have both in our shop. So
this is the gut-specific fish oil. Now, why this one is important is because it has high EPA. EPA has been shown to be the version of fish oil that actually alleviates inflammation in the gut specifically, right? So most fish oils you can buy on the market tend to have much higher DHA. More often a 4-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio of DHA to EPA. DHA is really good for the brain and the eyes and the skin and areas that are distal from the gut. EPA is the one that's really focused in on reducing inflammatory responses in the gut, especially the lining of the gut, right? So this becomes a really important one. It also has PRMs, which are pro-resolving mediators. These are the intermediates of the metabolization of omega fatty acids, which actually stoke the anti-inflammatory response faster than the omega itself. So there's this Kickstarter in here called PRMs that are not used enough widely because they're so powerful, and it's such a cool area of study of lipid metabolism. But these PRMs are extremely powerful in kind of jump-starting the effects of the omega fatty acids, right? So at the end of the day, you really need to bring down that inflammation that's going on in the lining of the gut, especially if you're constipated, because like I mentioned before, when food and stool and all sits in the gut for longer, it tends to putrefy. And the putrefaction byproducts really drive even more inflammation. Bridget had mentioned MegaGuard. MegaGuard can be quite powerful for people that really get that gastric fullness, that bloating, that feeling of just like this rock sitting in your system and it's just not moving after a meal. MegaGuard really gets the bowels moving in that way. So it helps with that gastric emptying, pushing the stomach for peristaltic activity to drive food down. It also helps increase bile flow, which is really important in order to be able to move the food down and also metabolize the food properly. And then, of course, detox the food as well, because bile plays a very important role in not only grabbing onto and absorbing fat-soluble nutrients, but also grabbing onto and taking to the liver fat-soluble toxins, which are the majority of toxins that we encounter tend to be lipid or fat-soluble. So bile plays a very important detox role. Bile is, of course, produced by the liver, and if the liver is fatty and the liver is damaged, or starting to get damaged, it doesn't produce enough bile. So your bile acid pool is small. So that's another reason why you become more susceptible to toxins from food, because you're not producing adequate bile, which means you're not removing enough of the toxins within the system. So it all goes hand in hand, right? It goes back to why it's so important to support the liver, why it's so important to think about the gut microbiome all the time. And then the MegaGuard will also help the liver and help with secretion of bile acids. And then Megaspore, which I should have mentioned before when we were talking about liver, we actually published a study showing Megaspore has a significant ability to protect the liver against toxigenic exposure. We did a study, an animal study, because of course you can't do this on humans, but it's an acetaminophen overdose study, right? So you take groups of animals, and then you can mice, if you will, and then you can overdose them on acetaminophen, and that creates liver toxicity, and that creates liver damage. And then you could test different compounds to see their ability to protect the liver against in view of that damage. So we did Silymarin, which is a prescription grade milk thistle from Europe. We compared that to Megaspore compared to no treatment at all. And of course, the no treatment at all, those animals their livers became very fatty and very cirrhotic, and they did not do well at all. And then the Silymarin or milk thistle animals actually did quite well. The milk thistle protected the liver quite significantly. That's a good option for people that want to support the liver as well. And then finally, the Megaspore protected the liver just as well as the milk thistle did. And then when they actually did the pathologies and looked at the cross-sectional tissue cultures of the liver, they actually saw some significant protective and repair function when we used the Megaspore. So you're talking about the liver and how important it is. Know that Megaspore does protect the liver, and that's we've shown that through a published study.
Wow, I did not know that. That's super interesting. So cool. Yeah, I'd love to know more about that. I wondered, okay, this is putting you on the spot. Are you guys ever going to come out with like an enzyme-based digestive product?
Yeah, one of our philosophies were, if and I still are, if somebody else is doing it well enough, the way we see it, then it's not something we need to get into just yet, right? So we did come out with the enzyme product called FODMate. What we saw was that was a missing piece, because regular digestive enzymes don't go after FODMAP components, right? And it's really the FODMAPs that create all this bloating and food intolerances with people. That's 80-90% of the time, that's what it is, right? And so a lot of people are also going on low FODMAP diets, which may help alleviate symptoms temporarily, but that's actually not good for your microbiome long term, because lots of FODMAPs are really important fibers, right? So that's a continuous problem that we see, is that people have to go on low FODMAP diets because they can't tolerate FODMAPs. It creates a lot of bloating and discomfort. But then because of the low FODMAP diet, their diversity is going to shrink. Their keystone species are going to shrink, which makes them even more susceptible to more food sensitivities, right? So in our view, we're like, that's a really important missing enzyme, is one that allows people to tolerate FODMAPs well and get all the benefits from FODMAPs without the bloat and the discomfort.
Gotcha.
So that became our first idea. So we've looked at enzymes from like Enzymatica and some of these companies.
Yeah, I actually have them right here. I think this is the one we sell. I think it's fantastic.
The Digestive, it's a great digestive enzyme. And so, for us, that's a good one to recommend. And it's not something we need to get into. We did get into the wheat digestion. We do see gluten and inadvertent gluten exposure as a problem. We didn't think it was a problem. A few years ago, you would think, okay, you could just go on a gluten-free diet and avoid it. The problem is in 2019, a publication in the American Journal of Gastroenterology showed that upwards of 50% of gluten-free foods like pizzas have gluten in it. All these gluten-free foods are contaminated with gluten. And so even if you're on a gluten-free diet, you likely have inadvertent exposure to gluten. So we created the gluten product in order to be able to support the gut and allow people to be able to go out and eat, even if you're ordering gluten-free, to be able to digest gluten in the stomach before it actually gets into the small intestine, right? So that Wheat Rescue product is the other enzyme product we saw a need for.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, we do carry the Wheat Rescue. We don't carry the FODMAT. The FODMate, is that what it's called?
Yeah, FODMate was
quite yet.
For a while, I think it was one of our top selling products. It was when we launched it. It was at that time the best launch in terms of adaptation and volume of product. I think people are very eager for it because people really don't like having to try to follow a low FODMAP diet. It's tough, right? I mean, there's so many foods that fall in that category. I think this gives people a little bit more flexibility. The lecast really big launch that took off faster than we thought it would was the Pyloguard, the H. pylori product. I don't know if you've carried that yet, Bridget, but that's a pretty interesting and phenomenal product.
Sorry, I'm just trying to help someone who wanted closed captioning. I don't know if I can turn it on right now because it's within YouTube and I don't want to I'm in a different software, so I'd have to go into it. But yeah, you guys are coming out with a lot of products that I don't all have all of them. But we do have a link to their larger store that we can share. So we can, help you out with that. But we have a lot of their products. So yeah, I just going back to the Mega Guard and the Digest, like you said earlier, that some healthy people still aren't
Mhm.
absorbing, and I do think that's another gap.
Yeah.
Is especially as we age, we don't make as many enzymes. Maybe like you said, the liver's taking a beating. You're not making as much bile. Um, and taking even like if you only get it in at one meal, some
Mhm.
kind of support for motility and breaking down foods, it can really help. It helps me like have more regular bowel movements too
Mhm.
if I'm taking it. I'm like the worst at remembering to take something when I eat. I don't know why. But when I do it, it makes a difference. So yeah, those can be potentially some supportive products if you just feel, oh, I know another thing I want to circle back in. I'm not a fan of the forever low FODMAP diet, and I'm sure
Right.
you're not either, right? It's not good
Mhm.
for diversity. I did find that a lot of my own food sensitivities went down as I worked on mold poisoning, as I worked on my gut health. So you can get more diverse. It just takes some time.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you find that you can't eat 50 foods, that's you need to see a practitioner and start
Yeah.
working on things because that's just not normal.
It's not, and it's not good to be that restricted.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we've kind of touched on this Zen biome cope in a couple ways. Anxiety, which kind of goes with different types of IBS, stress handling support, which can stimulate or come from your microbiome. Anything else you want to add to this product about this product?
One of the things I love most about that product, which to me is absolutely fascinating when you think about the world of microbes, is the ability of the product to change your brainwave function.
Oh,
So we have published studies showing that the product puts your brain more towards a theta wave band, which is that meditative flow state that people try to get into, which is the whole benefit of all the meditation work and all that people try to do. So the fact that it can get your brain waves into that more flow state, meditative state, is absolutely phenomenal because it puts you in a place where you can deal with adversity better. It's easier to rationalize through problems that occur rather than having irrational thoughts around the problems. It also activates an area of the brain called the coping center. And these coping centers of the brain is an area that's really important to not generate spiraling negative thoughts around things that happen, right? And that's one of the ways that people really start to plummet is something stressful happens or bad thing happens, but you keep spiraling these negative thoughts about it. And so it activates the coping centers of the brain as well. So it's really fascinating. It goes beyond the management of stress and improvement of mood. It's actually changing your brainwave function, which is fascinating to me.
that's super cool.
And I love
Yeah.
the product for that. It's one of the ones that right off the bat when we launched it, I remember to take it all the time because to me that it helps you just deal with everything better. Whether it's kids or work or spouses or your neighborhood or your society, whatever it is, right? Or
Yeah.
even just like the myriad of things that irk people, on the news, right? The political issues and social issues. There's just so much of that all over the place,
Yeah.
inundated
The
us nonstop.
economy. It's
Yeah, the
intense.
economy. Are we going into a recession? I mean, it's like endless. And the problem with all that is we have so much, accessibility to all of that, right? We are bombarded nonstop with that information. So it becomes really hard for the brain to continuously work through and rationalize and compartmentalize and work through all of that bombarding. Know that our brain wasn't designed that way, right? We did not evolve with constant stressors being bombarded in the brain. We had really big, important stressors that occurred, whether it's a predator that was trying to eat us or a neighboring tribe trying to invade and kill you, but outside of that, as humans, we sat around a lot, right? We sat around and thought about things. We sat around and we foraged, we dug in the ground, we looked for things. We weren't constantly bombarded with information and bytes and megabytes of data. And so just to be able to try to get your brain to be able to cope with these types of things, it really helps to support that kind of brainwave function. So for me, it's really important. I'm constantly inundated with stuff,
Yeah, you are so busy. Yeah, so people ask, what are we talking about? It's this Zen Biome Cope. I'm sorry, there's a lot of glare, but I put it in the chat and it is in our shop, as is the Serene Skin. Those are a couple of our new ones, and I'll mention one other new one. Yeah, I've been really happy with both of them and wanted to share. Yeah, I mean, to me, like the most priceless thing in life is just if every day can be more pleasant, like more enjoyable, right? Like, what else is life if it's just
Exactly.
miserable? So, this stuff is really important to me. And when I was, at my sickest, I was also running a clinic, had a young child. I was always anxious, always stressed. You couldn't slam a door without me jumping. And honestly, I thought that was a permanent state.
Yeah.
And, I've taken a long time of working on my mindset and my choices and my gut. It all comes together. And I was just like driving here from the coffee shop today, and I was just like, I'm just like so peaceful. Like, just like pinch me. Like, is this, I didn't even know I could get here. And not to say I'm immune, right? But to me, yeah, I mean, of all the things, like that's the most valuable, right? To be present for your life and
And I
happy.
think at the end of the day, what you've been able to achieve, and this is one of the things that the product actually helps with, is this ability to not have things compound upon you, right? So here's the biggest thing that's occurring with the HPA axis right now. The HPA axis, for people that aren't familiar, is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, right? That's basically your stress response axis. That's your flight or fight triggering. When you experience an external stressor, whether it's a work thing or home thing or someone cuts you off on the road, whatever the external stressor is, your HPA axis gets activated. Cortisol levels start to go up to try to get your body ready for the flight or fight response. But then cortisol is supposed to dump in the gut, which it does. And then in the gut, it gets metabolized to a certain degree, which actually helps increase blood pressure to help with the flight or fight response. But then also cortisol is supposed to start binding these glucocorticoid receptors that are found in the gut and other tissues that will then start reducing the flight or fight response. So it's the way of coming down from the stressor. The problem is when your gut is dysfunctional, you're missing strains like the strain that's found in Zen Biome. When cortisol enters the gut, it actually makes your gut more leaky. And when your gut becomes more leaky, the first thing that happens is your inflammation goes up. And there's a particular inflammatory cytokine called IL-6. When that goes up, when IL-6 goes up, it actually reactivates the HPA axis.
Oh, wow.
Right? So you get another round of cortisol coming out, dumping into the gut, making the gut even more leaky, more inflammation, more IL-6 goes up, reactivates the HPA axis again. So what happens is a single stressor can cause this continuous reactivation of your HPA axis as if you're experiencing the stressor over and over and over again. What that does is it reduces your tolerance throughout the day. That means any other stressor triggers your HPA axis even more profoundly, right? So that's why you start to feel where like you might wake up feeling okay, but as the day goes on, like you stub your toe or you get one message that makes you mad in the morning, and then things start kind of spiraling out of control the rest of the day, right? Every little thing compounds upon that because you're already in this chronic flight or fight state, right? So if you're in that chronic flight or fight state, you can't cope and it becomes hard. That's why the product is called Zen Biome Cope, because it's all about being able to allow your body to come down from that stressor so that you're back at your basal state. So the next stressor that comes along, you have some room to elevate before you really feel out of control or you feel anxious and so on, right? So that is our hope, right? Our hope is to be able to allow people to experience stress you're going to experience stress. There's no way of getting away from it, but you need to be able to come down from the stressor. You need to activate the coping centers. You need to get the theta wave band going so you can feel okay. So you're not in this chronic anxious state. And that's where like really bad things start to happen, right? And so what Bridget is saying, how she can feel happy, you can feel at peace, you can feel moments of that throughout the day when you're not at this chronic state. You'll still go up and down depending on what's happening and things stress you out, right? But you will come down and you can be in that happy place. So that's a really important aspect of that product.
Such a cool tool. And I've been doing a few Instagram videos. I don't know if this is what you guys are calling them. I'm like, there's these functional probiotics now. Like, it's so cool. Like, you found strains that do certain things. It solves
Totally.
certain
They do
problems.
very specific things. That one is a psychobiotic. It falls in that category. It's a gut brain strain, one that specifically activates neurotransmitters in the brain, which is fascinating. And we have a number of those kind of probiotics coming out that are super exciting.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's move on to Serene Skin, which I mentioned briefly. And you told me it's not only for like eczema, dermatitis, it's also for aging and acne. So kind of any problem. Can you tell us about the strains in this guy?
Yeah, so they're very similar to the strains in Megaspore, but what we've done is we've increased the dose of a couple of the strains that perform very specific functions that we know have a major impact on the gut-skin axis, right? So the Indica strain, the Subtilis strain, those are increased quite dramatically because basically what we're finding out is, many of the skin conditions that you face, whether it's acne or eczema or rosacea, like any of the redness, inflamed kind of responses in the skin, those are all driven by inflammation at the layers of the skin, right? Especially at areas like the sebaceous gland. The sebaceous gland is where sebum is produced. That comes out. That's the thing that we pop out of our blackheads. And then also in the skin mucosa and the layer underneath, if there's inflammation in the skin mucosa, you are much more susceptible to having these red inflammatory conditions. One really important mechanism to protect against that type of inflammation that occurs in the skin is actually the activation of short-chain fatty acids in the gut, but more importantly, the activation of a particular short-chain fatty acid called acetate. Acetate is a short-chain fatty acid that leaves the gut and spends its time in peripheral tissues, including in the skin, in the sebaceous gland, and so on. So what studies show is that acetate brings down inflammation in the skin mucosa, and in the sebaceous gland of the skin. That helps significantly with inflammatory conditions in the skin, including acne. We honed in on acne, and the reason we did, because to us, it's a big issue when dermatologists are writing long-term antibiotic prescriptions to deal with pimples.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
The long-term, I think the profession that uses antibiotics the most, especially long-term use, are dermatologists, right? The average acne prescription is something like 130 days, where they're on pretty broad spectrum antibiotics like doxycycline, and then of course there's Accutane and so on. To us, knowing that there's something called the gut-skin axis, we should be able to do better, right? Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have to be on 3 to 6 months of an antibiotic to try to reduce your inflammation and acne on the skin. And so we did a first study with the Serene Skin, and a 30-day study, we saw a 35% reduction in acne lesions. So these are non-cystic acne lesions. Cystic acne becomes a disease in the eyes of the FDA, so we can't look at that. We can't really study that. But we looked at non-cystic acne. And then we said, wow, that is really effective. Most of the acne antibiotic studies are 12 weeks. So let's do it for 12. Let's do another larger study for 12 weeks and see what happens and see how it compares to the antibiotics that have been studied and used. And in the 12-week study, we saw almost a 70% reduction in acne lesions. And significant improvement in skin texture, hydration, some data on reduction of fine lines and wrinkles. And then we also saw significant improvements in people's guts, which is fantastic, right? So that's a wonderful side effect to have with everything else. So So yeah, Serene Skin is been a game changer for a lot of people with inflamed skin conditions, and it's especially exciting if it works for them and they don't have to go the route of long-term antibiotics, right? And that becomes a big goal of ours a big problem to resolve.
Yeah, and I just noticed for me, I just had some breakouts with my period recently, which doesn't happen all the time, but I was just thinking back to our conversation about the liver and the microbiome, like everything's connected, right? So if I'm not clearing hormones out as well through my microbiome, that's a problem. If my liver is taxed while I'm clearing a lot of hormones, that's a problem too.
Yep.
So this is just one more tool to support that. But yeah, also keep in mind everything we've said so far. Every symptom is just information. And I was like, where is this all coming from? But yeah, I really enjoyed this product too. And for people who are dealing with steroid creams or antibiotics or whatever, or just like me, like I just want to, one of my projects for the future, Karan, is like I love skincare and like
Yeah.
hacks for the skin. So this is definitely on my list. And yeah, taking care of the microbiome, drinking lots of water. I love fish oil for the skin. Something I'll be talking about more. So yeah, it is a bit of a spendy product, but like if you're trying all this other stuff and going to the doctor, like in a sense, it's not spendy, right? Comparatively.
No. I mean, when you think about the cost of antibiotics for that long, even if you're just paying the copay, we're talking about like $1,200 for a 3 month.
And so bad for
Taking it.
you.
And it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and there's all these
Yeah.
issues. And there's another thing I'll have to introduce you to soon, then Bridget, because you're so into the skin. I'm working with a company now that's doing a couple of our key spores in a topical for the skin, and we've completed now like 25 case studies, and it's phenomenal what it does to the skin. Just putting it once a day on inflamed skin, and even people have even been using it on um, hair loss, not male pattern baldness, but hair loss due to
Thinning hair.
yeah, exactly, thinning hair, and especially due to fungal overgrowth or
Oh,
alopecia. I think it's called areata. I think alopecia
okay.
areata. Yeah, which is almost like an autoimmune type of response, or a fungal response in the hair that causes hair loss or thinning. We've got some amazing case studies on it, but I'll have to introduce you to that product soon, so you can
Cool.
try it out.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a really fun way. I'm just sidebarring again, but as I age, like it's
Hmm.
really like taking care of yourself and feeling like pride and good in your body. Like it's one thing to like, do a bunch of expensive toxic stuff, but it's another to like keeping myself beautiful by like nourishing my body from the
Yes.
inside out. Like that's awesome to
That's
me.
awesome.
So
Yes.
yeah.
I just did a panel, which is at a dermatology aesthetics conference. On the panel, I was with a dermatologist and the plastic surgeon, and we were talking about, kind of an integrative approach to skincare. And it was really fun to be able to talk about how, and ran through some of the Serene Skin data on the largest probiotic acne study. And I said, imagine the idea of improving your skin by making you healthier, right? Versus like just kind of going after the skin with all of these different interventions, mechanical and so on, to try to make the skin look good, right, from the outside, when it's still pretty unhealthy on the inside, right? And if we
Yeah.
can make our skin healthy on the outside by getting healthy on the inside, that's the best way to go about it. And so, and we're getting more traction on that in the world of dermatology and plastics and all that too. So I think there's some exciting stuff coming out with integrative dermatology down the road.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I know like J-Lo doesn't drink alcohol because it's not good for her skin. And I see Jennifer Aniston promoting water. Like,
Right.
when you're on camera like that, it's best to do it from the inside out. They might be doing some things from the outside too, but it makes a difference. Okay, two last topics. I
Yeah.
don't have it with me, but the tiny Restore Flora. We
Yeah.
just put it in our shop because your rep told me about it because it gives a nice low low price point to get into this world of spores. And my understanding is it's a little more gentle, perhaps, than the megaspore on the gut. Is that right?
Yeah, and the reason we developed it, it was actually developed a long time ago. It was a request by a large pharma distribution company for their nursing home clients. So basically, they wanted a probiotic that helped nursing home residents dealing with things like antibiotic-associated diarrhea and lots of stool, soft stool, and loose stool, if you will. And every time these nursing home residents left the nursing home to go to the hospital for something, they would come back with their guts all messed up and having lots of diarrhea. Some cases they had C. diff and so on. So we developed this as a blend with Saccharomyces boulardii and 3 of our critical spores. And that product becomes a really potent product for people with antibiotic damage to the gut, or if you're taking antibiotics. And like you said, it is gentler. Most people don't feel a die-off response. It's a great way to start if you're trying to repair the gut. The version we have now, I think, has a 14 or 18-day supply, something like that, right? In there, it's actually designed to be sold at point of sale at the pharmacy for people that are getting an antibiotic script. So it's a good way actually to just kind of jumpstart your gut. And then you can go on to the megaspore. Because of the formula, because of the clausi in there and the Saccharomyces, it's actually really good for people with upper respiratory issues as well. So if you're experiencing lots of allergies and, coughs and things like that, if your upper respiratory tract is constantly kind of inflamed and irritated, it could be beneficial for that as well to kind of support the immune response there.
Cool. Oh, I like that use. Yeah, I just ordered this for myself too, because again, for some reason, this is just not a product I ever really got into. I never had a problem with megaspore, but I do have some of that like upper respiratory drainage type stuff sometimes.
Yeah, especially in the summer for you when it gets dusty out there and, it's just less moisture in the air to hold down particles, right?
Oh, interesting.
Particulate matter, you get much more exposure to it. All the desert dust that blows across places like Arizona, Nevada, and so on, with the low moisture, the things just don't get grabbed by droplets and then causes them to fall, right? So they don't fall, and so you get a lot more exposure to it. So you'll find that your sinuses and all are probably more irritated this time of year.
Yeah, moving to the desert, good for mold. But then I started to have spring allergies, and now it's kind of translated more into summer. I do okay in the summer. I think you're right. It's just dust, or if there's a fire somewhere, I'm in big trouble. So some indoor time. Cool. Yeah, I've been learning more about like drainage and the things in the head. And so here's one more tool for that. Also, I think I've been seeing for using binders for that kind of post-nasal drip. And what's the other thing? But basically saying that some of it too can be like leaky brain, causing some of that lymph drainage. So interesting. Okay, so I put that one in the chat. You guys, we have the bigger Restore Flora, but the little one is called PD, and that's the cheapest product you can try. It's on sale right now too, so it's $17 if you just kind of want to get your toe wet. Well, I'm going to talk about one more thing, but I'll just mention that we did not raise our prices yet when they came through. So, and we're putting everything 10% off. So right now, basically you're getting 20% off through the end of the month. So stock up, because at the end of the month, the prices are going up. We are doing something nice for you guys, which is we're putting a really great subscription price for you if you join. But yeah, the normal prices, just because everything's going up.
Everything's up. It's crazy. Cost of everything is just nuts these days.
Yeah. And they had never raised our prices to my knowledge. So
we never have, since the beginning of the company. What we found out is a lot of other companies in our space raise the prices a little bit every year, like 3-4% every year, but we've never done it. And we just got to a point where like we can't afford not to,
Yeah. So we're trying to like ease you guys into that change and like let you stock up. We still have like bulk discounts. You could probably work it and get some pretty good discounts on our site. if you work it. So I'm trying to help people out because I really believe in the products. I use them. I have them all over my house. Last thing I want to talk about was mold, because we did do a protocol before. I can pull up the PDF, but I know it involved the gut specific fish oil,
Mega Microbalance.
Mega Microbalance, which we mentioned briefly. If you have any of these handy, you want to pull out like the Mega or the.
I actually probably do. I usually have them on my shelf here somewhere. I might have it in here.
Jude, you definitely can take these while you're detoxing from mold. You just, on any protocol, need to make sure you're not doing too much. So for me, all the Microbiome Labs products are very tolerable. So I can do them in conjunction with whatever. But if you're more sensitive, you might have to slow down. So this is a Mega Microbalance, good for Candida, kind of mold's cousin. And the Mega IgG 2000 he put as part of the protocol. While I get the PDF, would you mind just kind of chatting on your thoughts on mold and your products?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a couple things to think about when we're talking about mold. A lot of times, and we're talking about external exposure to mold, right? One of the key things is, of course, binding up the mold toxins. The mold toxins, again, can accumulate in your body, accumulate in the liver and other areas like that. So this actually becomes important to support the liver again, because the liver plays an important role there in trying to detox your system from the mold toxin. So the megaspore becomes important for detoxing, the supporting the gut, detoxing the liver, and then the Mega IgG helps with the binding up of mold toxins and so on, and reducing the toxigenic impact. If you feel that you have a fungal overgrowth in association with that, that's where the Mega Microbalance will come in. This product actually goes after fungal overgrowth in the gut itself. And then lastly, the other one we talked about is the Mega Omega, because of its ability to reduce that inflammatory response in the gut lining. Because if you're getting exposed to mold, you're going to have inflammatory innate immune responses anywhere where the mold toxin is found, whether it's in the gut lining, which is a lot of it, and then of course in the periphery as well. You might see the inflammatory response in your skin, in your upper respiratory tract. You might feel it in your brain to a certain degree. So bringing down that inflammatory response becomes critically important as well. So I think those are, unless I missed something that we put in the protocol.
Yeah, I'm going to open it up right here so we can see what neither of us are going to remember what we said unless we actually see it. Okay, so I put the link in the chat. It's a nice, pretty PDF. So this was it. So all these products we really talked about, this is what to start out with, weeks 1 and 2. And then reducing the Restore Flora, weeks 3 and 4. The IgG.
And again, the Restore Flora is a great one to start because it is gentler in the system. So if you're detoxing from something like mold, you could have Herxheimer reaction. So that is, I'm glad we put that in as a start there.
You're like, oh, I'm so smart. I didn't get the thing there. Yeah, the Restore Flora, because some people do just have that die off, especially if you've been sick a long time, and then it moves into adding the Megaspore. Let's see, how is this different? And then I guess month 3, the fish oil isn't in there anymore. In month 4, the mucosa is added. Yeah. So some things are core, and then some things kind of bounce around, but that's the protocol right there.
Yeah.
This is how many bottles you need if you did all of it. I kind of rebelled because Kiran said to take, I think you said take 8 Mega IgG a day. And I'm like, you might only need 4 Mega IgG a day. So I put an asterisk there.
I love you.
But yeah, I really, and I think Kiran is the same kind of way. It's like there's an attraction towards protocols. But it's also okay to experiment and, be like, oh, this product doesn't feel as good to me as this other one. So I usually recommend just buy one bottle of all the things in the protocol,
Yeah.
see what you respond to. Because he's giving this great suggestion, but your body is your body, and we don't know, especially if you had mold, what other factors you've had, what
Right.
condition you're in right now. So it's a suggested protocol. It's a nice protocol. But if there's other things you heard, like you having, like me, a lot of anxiety with your mold, maybe you want to use, the Zen biome in addition, or you're having skin issues, so you swap out the Serene skin. So it is modifiable. But I will say we'll publish this interview soon, Karan. I have to show you. I know you're so busy, but if you can, I'll share with you. I interviewed a dad whose daughter lost all her hair at age 4 or 5, and
Oh my
eventually
God.
found every body hair. That's the autoimmune alopecia,
Right.
and it turned out to be from toxic mold. And
Wow.
because she was a little one, they basically, they eventually found the mold, and fixed it. But for her, mostly just focused on her gut, and that was it. And all her hair is back now. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So yeah. So again, protocols can vary. Like I think adults often need to do more binders and sauna and all the things, but can potentially restoring the gut be enough to like kickstart the whole body's healing? Sure.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this protocol that he's giving you here for the mold. And I apologize, it may not go over the groups, but it'll be on the YouTube replay. Is a way to like approach it from a gut centric way. It's maybe especially if you don't tolerate other supplements very well. I think they're a great way. We often in functional medicine go after bugs in a pretty intense way that can
We
be
do.
hard on you. Yeah, and in Microbiome Labs products, I've never had one personally give me any trouble. There's no
Right.
die-off, there's no drama. It's just for me like nice and easy. So if that's something that appeals to you, check it out. You can always adjust dosages too. So yeah. Let's see. Any other final thoughts, Karan, before we take a couple questions?
I think next time what we should talk about, we should dive into H. pylori a little bit. We're doing a lot of work on H. pylori, and I think that's an important area especially when it comes to GI health in general. And then we've got a number of developments. Like some of the products we're putting in different formats for choices for people. For example, the Mega Mucosa, if you don't want to do the powder, we are launching next month the Mega Mucosa capsule product.
Oh,
Like we did with the Mega Pre, and lots of people like that. They're like, I'd rather not have a powder with flavoring and all that, so I want a capsule. And a very exciting version of Mega Pre that's coming out early September is the squeeze pouch. That's in a fruit puree basically, and it's a Mega Pre dose. It's great for kids. Lots of adults love it too. It's just an easy way to take a product, right? It's just a squeeze pouch, one a day. You pop it open. It's a nice mango flavor with the mango fruit puree in it, and it just makes it easy, convenient. So some cool stuff coming out over the next several months, and we should get back together and do this again.
yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm so curious about these different strains. And I didn't get to all the questions, but could we take like a couple before you go, or would you, if it's okay, if not, I know
Sure.
it's
Yeah,
late there.
I have a couple minutes, so I could definitely.
Okay. So see, Saida asked a good question. Can you use Restore Flora if you have mast cell activation and histamine intolerance?
Yes, there should be no issue with that at all. None
Okay.
of the strains are histamine producers, nor would they trigger an IgE type of response in the system. So you should be perfectly fine with it.
Okay. I have to go back if I want any.
Mhm.
So maybe that's all we'll take. But I know I missed some. I did try to cover a few as we go. Let's see here. Well, if you have a last question to squeeze in, go ahead. Yeah, maybe we kept up pretty decently, actually. And you can always email our team afterwards if we missed a question. But yeah, Ken, you can certainly do those types of binders you suggested, or we sell a few different binders. And they can be a nice way to clean up things too as well. And then the Mega IgG is more of a, what would you call it? Immunoglobulin style of cleaning up.
It is. It's more specific, right? So it's not. It targets certain things, and so it's a different approach to binding.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone who's live. It always makes it way more exciting to me and I'm sure to Kiran. Yep. So we're not just talking to each other. And Kiran, I just always love to connect with you. Appreciate your time.
Same here.
Yeah, we're going to get this all noted up for people who are like missed this and that. We're going to get like timestamps of everything we talked about so that it'll be really clear. We'll put that mold PDF. I'll put the links to the shop again. 10% off through July, which is really 20% off. So stock up. There's, lots of great products that we're adding, and we're happy to do that for you. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Good night. Good to see you as well.
Bye-bye.